What is up, Alien Army? I am Oculus, the alien next door, purveyor of esoteric lore. And today our esoteric topic, we are going to do something a little bit different. This is going to be more of a podcast style, and I am going to have a guest with me on this video today. So I would like to take a moment to introduce Mr. John.
Hello, thank you.
And today we are going to be discussing a very esoteric topic, which I find so interesting. We're going to be discussing what is human currency and how are third dimensional beings being manipulated through electrical currency by beings in the fourth dimension. Okay, so I have a few other videos regarding this topic. We're touching on it a little bit, but essentially through things that I've channeled and just my general knowledge, I am aware, and I'm sure you guys are too if you're looking at a video like this, that a lot of those individuals who are considered quote-unquote asleep in the third dimension are not even aware that they are electrical beings. They are electrified, just like you and I are, only they're asleep to that knowledge. And as we know, beings in the fourth dimension are also electrical beings. Sometimes they can take form physically, but they are primarily electrical beings. And what is currency? Currency, if we want to think about what is an electric current? Currency. Can currency also be money and finances? I mean, currency has so many different definitions, and it's a very interesting topic to me. So we're going to get started with human currency and how it's being manipulated from the fourth dimension into the third dimension. So let's get started. Now, human currency, as I said, has many different meanings. There's monetary currency, there's energetic currency, there's different ways of being manipulated through energetic outlets such as phones and TVs and all types of things. Just think of anything that involves electricity. Now, fourth dimensional beings, what they can do is, since they don't have physical bodies, they're able to manipulate through these devices. Okay, so now these devices that we see here in the third dimensional realm, such as smartphones and computers, even Wi-Fi and things like that, they all carry with it an electrical current, as does the human body. So if someone is in a human suit, guess what? They have an electrical currency. And if we want to think of a Wi-Fi, if you've ever heard of someone's Wi-Fi being quote-unquote hacked and things like that, the same thing can also happen to a human body because they are primarily electrified beings. So now I'm going to hand it over to Mr. John, who also has his thoughts on this. So Mr. John, what are your thoughts on fourth dimensional beings maybe trying to take over beings in the third dimension via electronics such as radio waves or computers or smartphones or things like that? What do you think?
Well, don't forget artificial intelligence.
I totally slipped my mind.
Yes, indeed. Well, a little bit about myself. I think what's really necessary in order to understand the gravity of the topic is to have a well-rounded understanding of the bigger picture and not so much focusing on one area. I think currency to me is probably the best example, one of the best, because you can see its presence in so many dominions, in so many different ways and dimensions. Currency as a money, as a financial instrument, a greenback or a financial note like a Federal Reserve note is a form of currency. A bond is currency, a stock is currency, real estate is currency, the gold is currency, silver is currency, cigarettes can be currency as well. So we have this aspect of providing a certain value to a material thing. However, currency could also be immaterial. I mean, obviously we think of electric current, being that of electricity, and which is more of an energetic example. But then we could also think of an ocean current, when the ocean, ebbs and flows, goes up and down, and therefore is providing a current. So currency is actually movement. And interestingly enough, one of the things I did forget to mention was that ideas are currency as well. So an idea, intellectual property, is a form of currency just the same. So going back, I think that in order to really understand the gravity of what currency is, we have to go to its origins, not just its origins in human history and understanding, but in terms of physical reality. Like where does the energy begin from? That's the key. And so for me, I look at it that currency begins from the divine, from prime creator, from the original, from the originator. Currency is essentially, to me, the energy stream that comes through our soul as it's hosted and within our flesh and provides the spark of life to us. And every moment of our existence, we have a steady stream of divine energy that comes through our soul and powers our flesh, our mind, and our spirit. And so that, to me, is where currency originates from.
Well, I think you spoke that very well. I do agree with you on that. With currency is essentially something that is divine, although I'm sure you're aware, as I am, that currency can also be manipulated from one dimension to another into something that is taking the divine energy currency and essentially perverting it, right? Like if we have an energetic being who essentially, they also were created from the divine, as everything is, but somewhere along the way they got a little turned around, they got a little upside down, they got a little sidetracked, and now they're not so divine. They may be constructed of divine particles or energetic frequency, but their intentions are to really pervert the divine. So I definitely agree with that, because as everything originated from source, which is divine, everything is connected, and therefore that's why these beings are able to manipulate other beings, because essentially we're all connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that, but what I'm speaking of is unified currency, which is the original source of currency into this realm, through the soul as the apparatus, as the window to it, empowering the body, empowering the genetic memory of each cell in the mitochondrial DNA, empowering the brain to fire its neurons and come up with creative ideas. And each idea, every single thought generates an atom. And so therefore, if every thought generates an atom, then thoughts are also currency. And this is so important, because when you realize that your thoughts are currency, then you could begin to understand how a 3D or a normal person who is not really aware of such things can be manipulated and influenced to put their thoughts in places that are counterintuitive to the divine. Okay, to the divine meaning, you're in your workship. Your workship, or a form of worship, is being in your element and conducting your divine purpose. So these entities are here because that energy that comes through the soul, that divine currency, is food for them. It's sort of sunshine to a plant. Human beings and mammals need sunshine as well as plants. So when you understand that you can have one food source for multiple entities or multiple constructs, that everything is energy. Everything is energy. And so when you understand that, then you can understand how we're all one, essentially, on an unconscious level. And so when thinking about the stream of energy coming through, you think about fourth dimensional beings that want to influence you. their primary is going to be utilizing the same currency that is generated, that they've harvested from others, okay, in order to lure you into a trap, so that way they can extract energy or currency from you, okay, almost like milking the soul. Okay, so this is going to really make sense a little bit when we talk about the media's role and how they induce the response, when we understand the anatomy of how it works. So essentially, I'm sure your viewers are very familiar with the chakra system, okay, and how they are different vibrational frequencies on the spectrum, yeah, and how the lower three chakras tend to have the lowest frequency and are basically mainly a fear vibration. Not to necessarily say that those chakras don't have their place and low frequency doesn't have its place, but those are the areas where fourth dimensional beings will actually hack into you, into your aura, and interface with your physical endocrine system in order to extract currency from you. Now, it's not something that's painful or anything. I mean, for the most part, there's children who, in the crib, these entities will latch onto them and plug in and basically feed off of them, literally like a leech sucks blood. They suck energetic blood, essentially. And so what they feed off of is anything anti-God. Anything high vibration, high frequency, anything loving, anything beautiful. That is not what they like. They like misery, darkness, destitution, and fear. And will go out of their way to create havoc in your own little world, in your own little way, just to trip you up, just to get you to lose your temper, to get you to lose focus on the most productive thing in the room that you could be doing, and instead focus and use your thoughts, which are currency, to focus that energy onto things that are going to feed them, like losing your cool, cursing, or excessive venting, blame on others. Any of that kind of negativity is basically a harvest for these creatures. And so those kinds of thought patterns are based in a fear vibration, low frequency vibration. So now when we understand that it's the low frequency energy that is most desired by these beings, okay, and we can zoom out a little bit. I mean, the conspiracy theory is no longer a theory, right? One world government and all of the above. But when we look at specifically the media and how they manipulate and use neuro-linguistic programming, okay, to jostle your mind, so that way they can have more direct access to your subconscious. And what do? They report on stabbings, robberies, murders, fighting within the community, disputes, etc. Anything that causes conflict, chaos, and fear is going to be what they project on all of the stations. And kid you not, they're all owned by the same parade. But my point being is that these newscasters are working hand in hand with the dark forces in order to project out a fear-based message, in order to induce a fear-based response from the population, whom are unknowingly and unwittingly energetic cattle for these entities that are going around and feeding off of people's misery, essentially.
I mean, what you basically went into is somewhat of a description of how this human energetic frequency currency is harvested. So if we want to think of your example, such as cattle, we can say that the unawakened human who has no sense of their soul or their divine origin, they're essentially cattle roaming the earth, and when when essentially the farmer wants to bring the cattle to slaughter, or when the farmer wants to milk the cow just really has no say in the matter, because the farmer, and an example I like to use, always, comparing like a human to someone who's, a dog, or in this case, a cattle, there's a different psyche, there's a different mental construct, because they are beings, they are sentient beings, but essentially one who is in the body vehicle of a dog, or one who is in the body vehicle of a cow, they are not viewing things from the level of a human. So essentially they can perceive the human as being more forceful than them, greater than them, leading them to their victory or leading them to their own demise. And a human mind has more of an intelligence than the mind of a dog or a cow. So we want to go back and say that the construct of these energetic beings in the fourth dimension, they are very intelligent, okay? And they do see things from a different perspective than someone in a human suit does. So if we want to say, with the farmer leading its cows to slaughter, a lot of these demonic entities in the fourth dimension, because they just are seeing something from a different capacity than the unawakened human can, they are essentially leading these humans to more negativity. Or
yes, but I don't see, there's a contention there, because there's, just like you have some people who are awake and some who are asleep, not all of these entities are equal. And so you have to understand that when you have someone who's asleep, the type of entity that might be feeding off of them might not be the same entity that might be feeding or fighting an individual who's aware of these things and is rocking the boat, per se. And what do I mean by rocking the boat? Rocking the boat is essentially, there is three examples, I guess we'll situate on. Is the first, the most common, is the individual who's asleep. Basically, the blue pill individual, they're asleep, they have no perception of what's going on. They have no idea that there's silent weapons being used on them in a silent war. And so therefore are completely inept at defending themselves. And so they're mindless cattle, and they're harvested from what we would call, I guess, civilian demons or civilian entities, these electrical beings, right? Just like a crystal is alive, but doesn't really construct life as we perceive it, is the same way that a being can be based from electrical current, just like a crystal can be based off, I guess, someone would say rock, right? So, or even a plant for that matter. Our understanding of life for the common man is not as, I guess, as prevalent or as wide as it should be, considering the day and age that we live in. So the second type of human is the human who is
awakened.
Not awakened. They're very happy-go-lucky. Their lifestyle choices are very healthy. They are just the type of people who don't let things get to them. They don't, dwell on the past or on negative circumstances. They're always go-lucky and proactive, ready to do what they need to do to get to the next level, constantly growing. Energy is flowing through them without any blockages and at a very high frequency. So these particular people, the entities tend to stay away from them because they're not really susceptible to being manipulated. So what these entities will do will be to invest some currency into doing something in your world that will trip you up or make you or influence you, I should say, because they can't make you do anything. They can only influence you to do it yourself. And that's why thoughts and currency are so important. And so what they'll do is they'll expend a little bit of energy in hopes that they can bring a little bit of chaos to your world, and that will allow them to harvest 10 times more, 100 times more than what they put out to begin with. So for the second person who's happy-go-lucky with a brilliant aura, okay, they're not going to be susceptible to that. So if an entity tried, they're just going to be wasting their currency. They're going to be wasting their money, their energy. They're going to be wasting their time. They're trying to trip up this person, and it's not working. So just like a bully, they just move on to easier prey, essentially.
They're not a good source of food. They're not
Pretty
easy
much, yeah.
to feed off of.
But the thing is that this human being is also at the same time is not a threat, right? Mm-hmm. Because you got to,
because they don't know what's going on. They're kind of like in happy oblivion.
Yeah, ignorance is bliss. Except like when you believe it that much, it actually becomes bliss. So, which is great. But the thing is that if you don't rock the boat, they'll move on to the next target and an easier target. And you can have multiple of these demonic entities feeding off of one soul or one flesh at the same time. So, most of the time they travel in groups. Now going forward to the third type, which is the individual who is aware and understands how the world works, and moreover is doing their part to impart that knowledge on other people, on other cattle per se, to wake them up. And so what happens is these particular individuals are declared war on because they're rocking the boat. They're going to mindless cattle who are easy targets for food, and they're shaking them and saying, hey, this is what's going on. You're being targeted. This is why dark things keep happening to you. This is why you're constantly in a downward spiral, constantly new bullshit, excuse my language, coming into your world, manifesting. And you don't understand how one thing after another just keeps happening. And it's because you're being fed off of. And you may even be under attack, under a declared attack. See, the thing is, when you get into this spiritual battle, it's no joke. But I'll tell you this much, that once you step into the arena and you're aware of your adversary, they're going to come for complete destruction of you. They're going to do everything they can to take away everything you love, to keep you isolated, to make you hate yourself, until they get to the capstone, which is you committing suicide. That is what their ultimate pleasure is. And so knowing that, I think it's very important to understand that if you really are going to aspire to be a part of the army of God per se, you have to know these things, that you're going to be under attack from things that you don't truly understand and that you can't even see. So just take solace and bring Jesus into your heart, and with him, you're invincible. So, but it is important to understand this, because what ends up happening for these warrior demons that come after, human beings that, understand and rock the boat and educate other souls so that way they're no longer easy prey, right? Is that they will whisper things into your mind and make you believe it came from your heart. And they'll do this to others around you. They'll influence them because maybe they're not as strong as you. Maybe you live in a household or surrounded by people that you love and care about who are not as aware as you are with these things. You feel lonely and isolated. You have to be strong. But you have to know that at the end of the day, love in your heart will prevail over evil. That's what Jesus preached. Live from within the heart. So with that being said, just make sure that when you're dealing with these things, you do your best to arm yourself. Now, how do you arm yourself? Well, you need to take iron. It's very important, especially non-hemp iron. It's very, it's much purer, and it's based out of animal protein. You can get the plant-based protein iron, but it's not going to be as potent as animal-based protein. Animal-based iron. It's much purer and much concentrated, so you need a lot less. But why is this important? Okay, two other things that you guys might find interesting is that our blood has our life force. And just like the earth, our blood is spinning around our body, just like the earth is rotating around an iron core, or the iron core is rotating within the earth. Yeah? And so this iron core creates an electromagnetic field around the earth. And remember, the earth, that we are an extension of the earth. We are essentially the earth in bipedal form. The resonant frequency of our brains and the Schumann resonance within our brains prove that we have the same vibrational frequency in our brains as the earth does in the ionosphere. So that's one way to protect from Wi-Fi, is through generating your own Schumann resonance, and you can Google that. So the iron in the blood is important, just like the earth, the core of the earth spins to create the electric field. The heart pumps blood through the body and spins blood around the body to create an electromagnetic field, which is one of the layers of our aura. Okay, so this is very important, is that your aura is an energetic field that represents your will. It represents your spirit. And so when your aura is strong, it's harder to be influenced by things not of loving nature of the one true God, the creator of all. And so, part of, the whole manipulation is the food and the lack of nutrients, the lack of minerals in our diet, which leads to us having weak blood, which means our auras have holes in them. It's not fully strong. And an acceleration of this is when we drink alcohol or we consume spirits. Is another synonym for alcohol. And the reason they called the liquid, the alcoholic beverages spirits, is because when you're drinking alcohol, it has a huge impact on the heart. And it temporarily weakens the heart, which also then has a ripple effect to weaken the aura. And so when that happens, there's collapses in the aura where your magnetic field collapses in and of itself, and it leaves your chakras exposed. So that way an entity can come in and plug in, and guess what happens? You black out. The person who's acting is not you. You're not consciously present in your flesh. You've consumed so much spirit that your aura completely collapsed, and a being, probably, a very immature, silly being, is going to come into you and is going to create chaos while you're blacked out. And then you can blame it on the alcohol and, extend the sobering morning to putting to rest any drama that you created in the previous evening. Meanwhile, this entity is just feeding off of you the entire time, harvesting all this fear-based vibrational energy. And so you have to understand that there's a physical element to this too. It's not just, in your heart, in your mind. You got to have a pure trinity, mind, body, and spirit. They all have to be pure. Your body has to be pure, no toxins, no metals. Your mind has to be pure, no thoughts. And you can't have a pure mind if you don't have a pure body, because the mind is fractured if the body is toxic. And at the same time, if the mind is fractured, being that it's directly connected to the soul, that's when your currency starts being devoted onto the wrong direction, directly into anti-God. Whatever anti-God is, that's when your currency becomes inverted. Is when your body and your mind become toxic, then your spirit is firing currency for the darkness, feeding. I want to say darkness as evil. Darkness is evil. So, I don't know. I think I covered a lot there. I don't know how much, you
went on a mountain.
Yeah, I did. I apologize. But I think that it's all relevant.
It was good, yeah.
It ties in all together, and I think that, I think people should do their own research on what I'm saying. Do your research on iron and the aura and alcohol and spirits, and, do your homework and, see that these things that you think are monotonous and mundane and innocent carry so much more weight. You got to expand your awareness and your perception to see these things. Otherwise you're doing yourself an injustice and you're doing your posterity a disservice.
So, you touched on about how alcohol is spirit and the chakra system, and how the chakra system, if the heart, because the heart is essentially, it has a very strong magnetic frequency. So if the heart chakra is the middle chakra, which connects the lower, which you said were more fear-based, and the upper chakras, which are more ethereally love-based. If the heart chakra is out of balance, then that's going to disrupt the entire energy system in the body and leave someone more susceptible to maybe demonic possession or influence by
oppression.
Demonic,
Oppression is usually more common than possession, although interestingly enough, the Vatican has had a hard time keeping up with the amount of exorcisms.
I heard that, yeah,
all over the world, and they're having trouble actually graduating enough.
Yeah, they want to ordain more priests to keep up with that. I saw that too.
Yeah, that goes to CERN, and them opening up portals to other dimensions and things of that nature, which we'll get to definitely. Maybe not this time, but maybe next time.
Oh yeah.
But I think that more importantly than the reason I really wanted to emphasize the things that I emphasized is because I think a lot of individuals invest a lot of their currency, thoughts, and actions and will. Into things outside of their control that really have no relevance directly to their world. Now, yes, indirectly it impacts you, but directly it kind of doesn't. It's a very soft, it's meant to be generally impactful. So I like to focus more on where individuals can actually have an influence and actually do things. And so by keeping it within the body, hey, take your proper iron, right? Make sure you get high quality iron. Don't get cheap stuff, okay? Making sure you understand what currency is, its origin is within you. So, I feel like this is the foundational, is let's focus on within, let's focus on what people can control and what individuals can do to arm themselves, with knowledge and apply that knowledge so that way they can be a living example, of competence, today. So, but I definitely feel that there's a balance needed between inner and outer, but we have to start with inner. We can't start with outer. Best thing that you can do to help the world the best thing that you can do to save the world, is to help yourself.
Take your iron supplements.
Yeah, well, that's a start, yeah.
The heart chakra is really the most important chakra that theoretically should be in balance, because you can have overactive, underactive upper and lower chakras, but if the heart is stable and secure wherever you are, when you're not being influenced by something outside of you, and you're just stable inside that sort of that wheel of fortune mode, right? Like you're inside the wheel and it's spinning, and you're aware of it, but you're observing it, because you're not getting strewn about by daily occurrences, because your heart chakra, which is the center of your being, is strong. So yeah, that's essentially what we are talking about today, and how human currency is harvested by beings in the fourth dimension. We kind of digressed a little here and there, but I think it's all good because we gave a lot of information, and we will be back again with more topics like this. So that is today's esoteric chit chat. I would like to thank Mr. John for being...
Anytime, you're welcome. Hopefully I'm back again.
Yes. And I am Oculus, the alien next door. Peace, good vibes, and namaste blessed, because you are.